Right then, as if any of us need reminded, times are tough just now, and with the UK expected to fall into its longest ever recession, they're about to get even tougher. So our politicians faced a whole host of difficult choices. If you were with us on the Sunday show last week, you might remember the Health Secretary, Humza Yousaf, told us the health service in Scotland isn't performing as well as it should. The Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, says Brexit has hammered recruitment. Put simply, we can't find enough nurses and doctors here in Britain. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, spent the end of the week on a visit to Scotland, and he came into the studios to speak to the Sunday show. I started by asking him about immigration. Might that be one solution to the healthcare crisis? Apparently not.
We don't want open borders. Freedom of movement has gone and it's not coming back. So that means fair rules, firm rules, a points-based system. What I would like to see is the numbers go down in some areas. I think we're recruiting too many people from overseas into, for example, the health service. But on the other hand, if we need high-skilled people in innovation in tech to set up factories, etc., then I would encourage that. So I don't think there's an overall number here. Some areas we need to go down, other areas we need to go up.
The whole problem with the health service is that it's got a crisis of staffing.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we were able to set out at our conference just a few weeks ago in Liverpool how many more people, 7,500 new people, recruit into and train into the health service from here, training people in. And we explained how we would cost that.
Well, certainly the experience in Scotland seems to be that people just aren't applying to train. There are places that are vacant that are being funded by the Scottish Government for midwifery and nursing that can't be filled because people just don't want to join the NHS. Well, so if we can't get them from here, where do we get them from?
Well, we certainly need to drive those numbers across the whole of the United Kingdom, and those numbers can go up, and I think they should go up, and we need funded places to drive them up. But of course, one of the reasons that the NHS is struggling is because it's such hard work. The conditions are so hard because the NHS has been run down. My wife works in the NHS, so this is a daily conversation about how tough it is in her hospital. It's really tough conditions. We need a long-term plan. All we get.
What does she tell you the problem with the NHS is? What does she think the solution is?
We haven't got enough people. We haven't got enough people.
But you don't want to use immigration as a solution for that?
Well, I think that we should be training people in this country. Of course, we need some immigration, but we need to train people in this country. What we've done, this is an absolute classic of this Tory government, is short-term fixes, plasters over problems, never a long-term solution. And we go round and round in circles. Every year, we have a winter crisis. Here in Scotland, we've got, 1 in 7 people on the waiting list. That is a total failure of the government here in Scotland. 1 in 7 people in Scotland on a waiting list. That is a statistic that ought to be sort of pinned up there on every little billboard across the whole of Scotland. It's totally unacceptable.
Let me ask you about a broader immigration question, about Brexit. I mean, it is demonstrably clear from economic data that Brexit has been damaging to the UK economy. Why do you support us continuing to stay outside the EU?
We took a decision on leaving the EU in 2016 and we have now left. There is no case for returning to the EU.
So it's a democratic issue?
We took the decision to leave and we have left. So now what we need to do is, rather than just sticking with the deal we've got, which is not good enough, we need to make Brexit work. We need a better deal. We need to fix the protocol issues in Northern Ireland, which are totally fixable. We need to remove the barriers to trade. There are too many barriers to trade. And we need to create much greater cooperation and collaboration on things like security. I think that can be done. There is a better Brexit to be had. But we don't go back into the EU after the vote that we've taken and the division and the stagnation that all of the arguments after that caused.
Because it was the will of the people?
We had a vote on it.
See, here's the problem with that argument, that there's a party that stood with another vote on Scottish independence at the centre of its manifesto in the last Scottish elections, and they won at an absolute canter. It was the will of the people to have a referendum on independence within the term of this Parliament up here, and you say that shouldn't happen. Why do you protect democracy across the UK but deny it to the people of Scotland?
I listened and watched very carefully the arguments into that election here in Scotland, and all parties were saying the priority has to be recovery after COVID. I think Nicola Sturgeon was challenged to say...
But a referendum in this term was at the heart of her manifesto.
Just let me finish this, because she was asked in terms, what if someone wants to vote SNP but doesn't want independence, and she said that actually recovering from the pandemic was the single most important priority. So I actually reject the idea. All the political
That person
parties
can still vote no at a referendum if they don't want independence. It doesn't mean there shouldn't be a referendum.
Every party going into that election last time here in Scotland was saying loudly and clearly, and rightly in my view, that recovery from the pandemic needs to be the central issue. Around people's tables tonight, they will be talking about whether they can afford to make ends meet. That is the central, most important issue, the economy, and the next election will be fought on the economy. And the choice will be carry on with this utter chaos and damage under the Tory party, or usher in a Labour government which will stabilise the economy and grow the economy.
That argument, that binary argument, might wash south of the border, Sir Keir, but up here there is a third choice, which is break away from the Union. Do you think the people of Scotland should have the right to determine their own future or not?
Well, look, I'm talking about priorities and what is the priority at the moment. And for me, the priority is the economy. And I think for many, many people across Scotland, many, many people watching this programme, the central concern will be the economy. How are you going to help me pay my bills and get through not just this winter, but the months that come after that?
But
that is
the
the
SNP are
central
telling
issue.
the electorate that the way to solve that is to vote for independence, and people are backing that in their droves.
I fundamentally reject the argument that the way you grow the economy is to put a border between Scotland and England. I don't think that will help us grow the economy. I think it will make a bad situation worse. But we have to be clear that the priority going into that election has to be the economy, has to be the cost of living, has to be answering the question that people are asking around their kitchen tables, which is, can I make ends meet?
Do you think the Union is a voluntary organisation, or are we stuck in it?
Well, of course it's a voluntary organisation.
So what's the democratic route?
But that's why we need to make... I believe in the Union. I think that if I think of all the fantastic things that we've achieved as a United Kingdom, we've done them together as four nations. If I look at the really big challenges that face us, climate change, conflicts such as Ukraine, dealing with the energy security.
Of course,
these are issues which it seems to me obviously can only be solved by the four nations, as one entity. But we need to make the argument for that. I do understand very many people in Scotland saying we want change, fed up with the Tory government back in Westminster. It's my job to sort that out by winning the next general election, and actually then we can have a Labour government to work with. But if you look at those fundamental challenges, the big challenges that face us are only going to be met with a strong union going forward, a progressive, forward, modern look to our union.
But I asked you if it was a voluntary union, and you said you thought it was. So what is the democratic route out of that union?
Well, look,
if one nation doesn't want to be part of it anymore?
We need to make our arguments. We need to have our priorities. And my priority is the economy, stabilise the economy and growing the economy.
What if people don't agree with you and they want out? Are they stuck in it?
Well, of course they're not stuck in it.
What's the democratic route out?
They're not stuck in it, but this is about priorities. What is the priority at the moment? The priority at the moment is people paying their bills, is growing the economy, single most important thing for our country.
50% of Scotland might disagree with that fundamentally and think the priority is independence. What do you say to them? The SNP have won every single election at every level in Scotland for 15 years. What do you say to the voter who has voted for them in every election because they want independence and are now being told, we know better than you?
I'll tell you what I would say. I'd say just look at those 15 years. And see what has happened. What is there to show for it? The economy...
But they're not listening to that argument. They voted for 15 years for this.
I really don't think that everyone across Scotland is completely immune from the cost of living, isn't bothered about their bills, doesn't worry about the shopping, doesn't worry about their mortgage. They're simply thinking about independence. I just don't accept that.
Why do you think Nicola Sturgeon keeps getting re-elected?
But let me finish.
What hold has she got over the people here?
Let me just finish this point, because it's been 15 years of failure here. Look at what's happened with the health service. Look at all those people on the waiting list. Look at the fact that economic growth has been negligible. Look at those, 120,000 green jobs that were promised. How many have been delivered? 20,000.
But if you actually look at people of Scotland are just daft. I mean, why do you think they keep voting for the SNP?
I think that the SNP and actually the Tory party in Westminster are using independence as a mask to say, well, don't look here at our record, look over here at something else. But I say, look at the record, and the record is a record of failure.
Will you have in your manifesto next time round a time frame for how and when a referendum on independence could be achieved? When will you tell the people of Scotland how they can get this vote if they want it?
I will have in the manifesto a very powerful case for the Union, and I will make that case to the country. A fairer, greener Scotland in a fairer, greener Britain, working together to meet the challenges of our time.
If the Supreme Court rules in favour of the Scottish Government and says they can hold a referendum on independence, we could get that decision in a couple of weeks' time, theoretically, certainly in the early part of January.
Yeah.
Will you accept that verdict and say there should be a referendum?
Well, look, I think it's good the case has gone to court, because I think it's better to have legal certainty so we all know the base on which we're operating. All the court is going to be able to rule is, if it does rule in favour, is that there could or can be, it's legally permissible to have a referendum. That doesn't answer the political question, which is should there be a referendum?
So
and my argument remains the same, which is if I look at what is bearing down on us, the climate crisis, we've got COP just around the corner. We didn't go far enough in Glasgow last year. We've got conflict in Ukraine, we've got an energy security problem, and we've got an economic problem in terms of the cost of living crisis we're facing. They would be my priorities.
So
and
just,
I'll go
so just
into that election making it very, very clear they're my priorities.
OK, so just to be clear, if the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, says yes, Holyrood can hold a referendum, and the party of government in Holyrood who has promised the electorate a referendum says we want to deliver that, you still say they shouldn't be able to hold that. That's completely anti-democratic, is it not?
Politics is about priorities, and my priority would be to deal with the issues that are bearing down on people this evening as they look and see whether they can
Does politics trump
pay
democracy?
the bills.
Do policies trump democracy?
Well, politics is about priorities. It's always about priorities. And we will go into the next election arguing about the economy. I will go into the next election making the case for the United Kingdom, not just on a backward look, although there's plenty that we can say that we've done well together, but on the forward look to the challenges that we face over the next few years, next few decades. All of those, I think, will only be faced if we have a strong United Kingdom. And that's the powerful argument that I want to make across the whole of the United Kingdom. But I do understand and realise that, one of the drivers, of independence, one of the drivers for change is the very strong reaction that many people in Scotland have to the Conservative government in Westminster. My job, and what I've been doing since I've been leader of the Labour Party, is to change our party, expose the Tories as unfit to govern, and put forward a Labour Party which has changed, has the answers to the challenges of the future, and is in a position to go into government. And, there is no route to that Labour victory in Westminster that doesn't run through Scotland, which is why I spend a lot of time in Scotland. Absolutely right. And so the
Scottish votes wouldn't have helped you in the
together.
past necessarily, wouldn't have made the difference in elections past.
It's very important to me that we see this as one United Kingdom. I want a Labour government that represents the whole of the United Kingdom, and that's why the road for me to a Labour government runs through Scotland, because Scotland matters hugely in this to me and my Labour Party.
So what went wrong?
We need to improve our position in Scotland. We've done a huge amount of progress under Anna Sawar in a very short period of time, got further road to travel, but I think most people would say the Labour Party now is the credible party, credible government in waiting. And, a hope of a Labour government has turned into a belief in a Labour government.
What went wrong for the Labour Party in Scotland? You delivered the devolved parliament, you dominated it for a while, and then 15 years ago you completely fell off a cliff. What happened?
Well, I think this is a wider story about the Labour Party, which is that we didn't align our priorities with the priorities of those that we were asking to vote for us. They became too far apart, and what I've done in the Labour Party since I've been leader is to turn it inside out and say to the Labour Party, having a discussion amongst ourselves in the Labour Party Labour movement is not a badge of success. What we've got to do is be facing the electorate in Scotland across the whole of the United Kingdom and making sure that our priorities are aligned with their priorities. Now, we've done a huge amount of work on this. Anna Sawar has really put that focus, that determination in here in Scotland. We're seeing the polls shifting. We're seeing a change in position. Labour Party came second in those elections earlier this year in Scotland. If we'd had this interview a year ago, you'd have probably challenged me as to whether that was possible.
But how far can you go with that? With your stance that's opposed to rejoining the EU, with your anti-independence, anti-referendum stance, do you really believe Anna Sawar can win the next Holyrood election, can become First Minister of Scotland?
Yes, I think we can make real progress. My focus is obviously on that general election, and you can see that we're making progress. The Labour Party has changed incredibly over the last 2.5 years. We are well ahead of the curve. If you take issues like the energy price freeze, which was the first party to come out and say we should freeze those energy bills, which was the first party to come out and say we should use a windfall tax on oil and gas companies made more profit than they expected to make. It was the Labour Party leading the way. We have to show, as we are showing, that we have the answers to the challenges that face Scotland and the whole of the United Kingdom.
All right. Sir Keir Starmer, many thanks indeed for your time.
Thank you.